Coming up, tariff news. Former Reagan economist talks tax cuts. Trump looks at massive cuts at EPA and promises not to touch Medicare, Medicaid and Social Security. Trump talks tariffs.
We've lost millions of people due to fentanyl. It comes mostly from China, but it comes through Mexico and it comes through Canada. And I have to tell you that, on April 2nd, I was going to do it on April 1st, but I'm a little bit superstitious, so I made it April 2nd. The tariffs go on, not all of them, but a lot of them. And I think you're going to see something that's going to be amazing. We've been taken advantage of as a country for a long period of time. We've been tariffed, but we didn't tariff. Now, I did, when I was here, we took in $700 billion from China. $700 billion. Not one president in the history of our country took in 10 cents from China.
Trump talks about the significant flows of fentanyl through Mexico and Canada, fentanyl mainly made in China. So tariffs will begin on the 2nd of April unless there is significant action on that front. The other bone of contention is that tariffs are already applied to the US where the US has not similarly tariffed other countries. This behaviour is going to stop under Trump. The beauty here is that other nations know that these are no mere idle threats. Trump will follow through. Then Howard Lutnick also talks tariffs.
When he says April 2nd, that's the baseline tariff. That says how you treat us is how you get treated. So you think, okay, well, we have USMCA, right? So we're supposed to have a free trade agreement with Canada, but they have a 5% national tax. Oh, well, that's 5%. They tax all our dairy products. They tax so many different things, lumber. They tax our food. It's outrageous. They basically cheat around the sides, and then when we don't act, they stop cheating around the sides. They cheat right down the middle. And the president is sick and tired of it. He's sick and tired of the countries adjacent to us inviting in China to their model, right?
Commerce Secretary Lutnick talks about the issue of tariffs imposed on the US. What the US is going to do is apply reciprocal tariffs. In other words, if country A has a 10% tariff on the USA, well then the USA in response will apply a 10% tariff to said country A. At a minimum, that would result in an even playing field. More likely, hopefully, the result will be that neither the USA nor Nation A will have tariffs applied to each other. In other words, genuine free trade. But Trump, quite frankly, is sick and tired of one-way trade on the issue of tariffs, literally and figuratively. If you enjoy this content, please like, share and subscribe. Then we have former Reagan economic advisor Art Laffer on tax cuts.
What we know very well is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act increased tax revenues to the federal government, didn't lower them. It made the poverty levels for the minorities, the disenfranchised, the less educated, the lowest in U.S. history ever. And U.S. growth relative to the Eurozone, which had been going right together, all of a sudden increased very much in favor of the U.S. All of the things they've said there are just counterfactual. I just don't get where these people get off saying that stuff without having consequences for them. It's just plain wrong, and I'd love to debate any one of them on a show you have on the facts of what happened with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, because they are just absolutely wrong on everything they say, and it's really dysfunctional for them to really be saying that to the American people. This was the greatest thing that happened last night, and that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is absolutely essential to the Trump prosperity.
Laffer says the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is central to prosperity. He is tired of the lies being told by Democrats on the issue of tax cuts. The reality is that not only do tax cuts incentivize innovation and development, which increases the size of the economic pie, but the wealthy are far less likely to look at ways of minimizing tax and just pay the tax, and this also increases tax income. The Democrats are lying about what has happened previously with tax cuts. Then again, Democrats see economics as an issue of winners or losers, which is fundamentally a Marxist proposition. They're unable to comprehend that economics can be that everyone benefits, as has happened in the capitalist world in particular since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Laffer continues.
If I can say one thing here, the taxes did go up with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. The rich paid more in taxes at lower tax rates. Revenues went up, not down. And you know, this was a win, 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 win. Who on earth would ever want to raise taxes and collect tax rates and collect less revenues? Right. You have to be dumb, blind, and stupid to do something like that. And that's what they're suggesting that we should do. It's crazy.
Yeah,
we got more revenues and we got more prosperity and we helped the poor a lot more with the tax rate reductions. Period.
Laffer points out what I said previously, but further adds that by increasing taxes, paradoxically, tax revenues decrease. Unfortunately, so does economic activity, which penalises everyone, and in particular the poor. But then the Democrats and the left more generally have never had a good handle on economic reality. They believe that the people to best control every aspect of the economy is the government. Staggering that they have this view given the waste, fraud and abuse that has always been so evident. But even more so these days, when the left want to take and use an ever bigger chunk of money from the hard put upon taxpayers. Frank Luntz talks about how Americans see things.
The media likes to talk about women. They like to talk about Latinos or African Americans. They want to talk about something that can polarize. And the paycheck to paycheck voters, Democrat and Republican, it's young and old. It's someone who's first generation or 15th generation. They're not divisive and they're not divided, with the exception of that they're desperate for politicians to listen to them, to learn from them, and to make their lives easier on a day-to-day basis, which means lower taxes. It means lower prices. It means focusing on food and fuel, housing and healthcare. And it really requires an understanding, not just of the economy, but how the average person lives from the moment they wake up in the morning until the moment they go to sleep at night.
Luntz points out that it is only the so-called elites that are divisive. The rest of Americans simply want to get on with their lives and have reduced taxes and more money on hand to live on. They want politicians to make their lives easier. He points out that politicians need to understand things from their perspective. Unfortunately, Democrats chase their ideologies and hobby horses and are not too concerned about the voters' desires, apart from how they can use those desires to gain power. In terms of costs and waste, Trump talks cuts.
Some of the secretaries, we're going to be going to them, we're going to be talking about it today, we're going to ask them to do their own DOGE. In other words, they'll look in their group and I spoke with Lee Zeldin, and he thinks he's going to be cutting 65% or so of the people from environmental. And we're going to speed up the process too at the same time. You had a lot of people that weren't doing their job, they were just obstructionists, and a lot of people that didn't exist, I guess, Lee, too. You found a lot of empty spots that the people weren't there. They didn't exist. I think education is going to be one of those. You go around Washington, you see all these buildings for the Department of Education. We want to move education back to the states where it belongs.
Trump indicates that Lee Zeldin has told him that the EPA can probably do with 65% of staff being cut. This will be the music to the ears of anyone who has seen how the EPA has sought to insert themselves into every aspect of life. This is particularly so with the heinous declaration of carbon dioxide as a pollutant. Given that carbon dioxide is part of every single part of economic activity, this allowed them to insert themselves literally everywhere, including what sort of car people would be allowed to drive in future. Good riddance to those people who are quite happy to destroy people's livelihoods and the economic well-being of all in pursuit of the ideological wet dreams. Senator Mullen talks about Democrat lies about the budget.
Guys, I am so sick and tired of hearing my Senate colleagues on the Democrat side, and actually I don't even want to call them colleagues at this point. They're just flat out lying about what's actually taking place with the Senate budget or reconciliation. They're going to the mic. This is new talking points. They're going to the mic saying that the Republicans are trying to protect Trump's billionaire buddies by protecting tax cuts and going to extend tax cuts to the billionaires and millionaires and pay for it by cutting Social Security benefits and Medicare benefits.
As Mullen states, the Democrats keep pushing the nonsense of tax cuts to billionaires and how it is going to cost ordinary Americans. This includes them effectively threatening Americans that supporting the budgetary initiatives that Medicare, Medicaid and Social Security will be cut. Exactly the same sort of thing happens in Australia. We also have a health system, but it's broader based, called Medicare. And one of the campaigns that the left-wing party in Australia pushed was the so-called Mediscare campaign. It was not overly effective either. Then we have Trump state what the real situation is.
Can you guarantee that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security will not be touched?
Yeah, I mean, I have said it so many times, you shouldn't be asking me that question. Okay? This will not be read my lips. It won't be read my lips anymore. We're not going to touch it. Now, we are going to look for fraud. I'm sure you're okay with that, like people that shouldn't be on, people that are illegal aliens and others.
While Trump states in no uncertain terms that Medicare, Medicaid and Social Security won't be touched, he gives the media too much credit in my view. He states that he is quite sure that the media will support efforts to weed out the fraud and corruption in the system. Here he is kidding himself. The media will be on the lookout for any story indicating someone who has been struck off the system. And if they've been knocked off for fraudulent claims, who cares? They will be at it. Then Frank Luntz talks about assurances to people living paycheck to paycheck.
Is that enough for those voters, Frank?
No, but nothing will be enough for them. And the reason why is that one health care crisis bankrupts them. And when I say bankrupt, it actually means they could lose their homes, they could lose their livelihoods. And so they're on the edge. And so they've heard this from politicians before, making promises that they assert, but they do not keep. And it's one of the reasons why Washington is so distrusted, why Congress has such a low approval rating, that the fact is the public does not believe that what they're being told is what actually happens. So the president and Congress are going to have to say this again and again. And frankly, they're going to have to show it in the actual legislation itself. Now, make no mistake, Donald Trump has a higher approval rating right now than he did at any time in his first administration. But, and this is a big but, some of the things that they have done over the last 2 or 3 weeks have tremendous support, but not the language.
Luntz says that the public is not trusting of politicians generally due to their ability to lie whenever their lips move. This is where Trump has a real opportunity. Most people see him as fulfilling his election promises, so the level of trust is likely to be higher. As Luntz says, Americans like what Trump is doing, but don't like what he is saying. I assume here he means how he says what he says, which is something that Luntz has said before. What do you think of the arguments the Democrats are making on tax cuts? Please let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.